Welcome to Politically Basic. I'm your host, Kyle Campbell. We are breaking down the basics of all political issues and current political events so that you get to decide for yourself. With international relations, conflicts, ceasefire negotiation talks, fragile international relationships, and a whole lot of US dollars heading overseas, it's more important than ever to understand and pay attention to US foreign relations. With me today on the show is Ambassador Carla Sands to talk about just that. She's currently the vice chair of the Center for Energy and Environment, America First Policy Institute, and chair of AFPI's Pennsylvania State Chapter, as well as senior advisor to America First Works. She was appointed to President Trump's Economic Advisory Council and as a U.S. ambassador to the Kingdom of Denmark, which includes Greenland and the Faroe Islands, from 2017 to 2021, and that year was awarded the Department of Defense's highest civilian honor, the Medal for Distinguished Public Service. Ambassador Sands, thank you so much for being on Politically Basic with me today.
Thanks, Kyle, for your warm welcome and that introduction. You're very kind.
Well, listen, Carla, you are so cool. Let's jump right into unpacking the basics of this. How did you come to become an ambassador to Denmark?
It's a great question, and everybody has their own path. There's actually a great career to be had by taking the Foreign Service exam and becoming a Foreign Service officer. And in that way, you can become a career ambassador. But I didn't know about that because I'm from a small town in Pennsylvania. I didn't know about the Foreign Service or that in Washington, D.C., you could literally learn about this as a career. But when I was 15, I took a test and I went home and told my little sister, when I grow up, I want to be an ambassador. And it's something that it was a dream of a high school girl. And it was sort of a North Star for me. If I had a choice to do A or B, always that was in the back of my mind so that I would never do anything that could prevent me from serving one day.
Wow. So that was literally tempering you along your life growing up, that you could potentially have this role and you didn't want to screw it up.
Exactly. I did not want to put a foot wrong. And so when I had a choice, I always did things the right way. I mean, it's part of my Christian faith as well. But, when you're young, you can choose A or B. And I really tried to go down the straight path.
Well, you did it well, and it landed you in this just amazing, remarkable, really honorable position. Tell us a little bit about why being an ambassador, why this role exists in the first place, and what does it entail to go through that process and to be an ambassador to a foreign nation representing the United States?
That's a great question. And so what you are as a U.S. ambassador is you're the president's personal representative in that country that you're posted. And after the prime minister or president, you're probably the second or third most important person in that country because of the power of the United States government. It has nothing to do with the ambassador personally. It's the power vested in them by the president and the power of our government and our military. And so as a career ambassador, you have a great deal of influence in the country. But as a non-career ambassador, a political ambassador like I was, you probably have a personal relationship with either the president or the secretary of state that you're able to get them on the phone. And that gives you even more power to get things done that are to the good of the American people, because you're really working for all the American people.
Tell us a little bit about what the U.S.'s relationship with Denmark has been and what it was like during the time in which you were an ambassador to that country.
Well, that's kind of a difficult question. So we've had a wonderful relationship with the Kingdom of Denmark for over 200 years. We've been great allies. We did things like occupy Greenland during World War II so that it wouldn't fall into German hands or their allies. And there's been a lot of cooperation. While I was there, we increased our U.S. trade with Denmark about 45%. So we created jobs here at home. We work to secure the United States, because it's not just Denmark in Europe, it's also Greenland, which is part of North America and about a third the size of the continental US, and then the Faroe Islands, which are near the the Shetland Islands of Scotland. So it's a big, big area of responsibility. And we have a great relationship. But I have to say, sadly, that Denmark, although they have policies similar to President Trump's as far as they're very tough on immigration and they know to take care of the Danes first because that's the government's job, they really reflexively do not like Republicans. In fact, they really dislike Republicans very much. But after they're gone, they seem to, some of them, like them more, because when I would go to the Danish politicians' offices, some of them had shrines to Ronald Reagan.
That's funny. Secret conservative lovers. That is amazing. Well, you seem to have great success in representing the United States over there, and we thank you for doing that. I'm not personally really well versed in how many nations we have US ambassadors at, but we do have a pretty robust ambassadorship all across the world. Is that still happening?
Yes, it is. So we have a representative in every country, unless we've closed our embassy, in which case we probably back channel through another country's embassy to do our diplomatic work. So for instance, we don't have an embassy in Iran. I think we've closed our embassy in Venezuela. It closes and opens and closes. So it's good to have diplomatic relations with the country. It's good to have a president that can pick up the phone and call world leaders, because diplomacy can prevent war. And that's the point of it. But for diplomacy to be successful, you have to have a strong military and the threat of force. Most countries' ambassadors, in whatever country they serve, they can't get a meeting alone with the prime minister or even the ministers most often. The United States and very few of our strongest allies can get those one-on-one meetings, but it's hard to come by for most countries. So diplomacy has to be backed up with the threat of force.
It doesn't seem like we have as much threat of force right now under the current administration as maybe we have had in the past. I don't know if you would agree with that, but is there an expectation that we should have someone continuing to strengthen the relationship with the United States in those countries like Iran or Venezuela, in those countries right now? Or do you think it's just too volatile of a time, no matter who's in leadership in the United States? Do you expect that to change in the future?
Well, if you look at Ronald Reagan's famous saying of peace through strength, you saw President Trump with his strong projected American power and a strong military that he was building up. He was able to get historic diplomatic successes achieved. He moved our embassy in Israel to Jerusalem as president, since Jimmy Carter had promised but failed. He was the author, or certainly the father, of the Abraham Accords, and that was the historic peace deal with diplomatic relations and trade relations restored with Israel and several Muslim majority countries. He also destroyed ISIS through using our military power in a targeted way. We had no new foreign wars under President Trump. And in fact, no American soldier was killed the last 18 months of the Afghanistan war. And he and his military and Mike Pompeo had an actual exit strategy from Afghanistan that would have kept Bagram Air Base, which is important. Now China is occupying our $1 billion air base. So it's a real loss and a tragedy. We lost 13 lives, and then many of our allied partners in Afghanistan were under threat and lost their lives. So yes, it's important to have a strong military and a strong president, and one that has a good relationship with heads of state, so they can pick up the phone and stop problems. When I heard that President Biden wasn't having phone calls with world leaders like Putin for years, that really worries me. You have to be able to talk to people in order to get things done, and that includes ending war. So we want to have good relations with every country. We do not want to be at war with other countries. But if they threaten us or they threaten our interests, then we need to have that strong military that is a lethal killing force and not a social experiment.
Let's talk a little bit more about that. Let's roll the clock forward. We're
Sure.
coming up on a very interesting presidential election, a chaotic one. A lot of changes are happening rapidly. And, we're just trying to keep up. Things are happening every day, and it's quite overwhelming here. I think that the American people's focus is pretty internal right now on what's going on with our own elections. But it's so important to look globally at what is happening in other countries. The Middle East is always, to some extent, going to be messy, right? They always have conflicts going on and kind of pushing each other's buttons. But rolling forward, should Donald Trump get back into office? We've had 4 years of that. We knew how he would operate as a leader. You nailed it with the bringing back Reagan's statement about strength through peace. We've seen what that can be. Potentially, should things go the other way in the election, what does that look like in your estimation? You're such a foreign relations expert. Predict the future a little bit for us, if you would. What does that look like internationally should Kamala Harris become president and take office in January and have to be that person who has to pick up the phone and negotiate or talk a foreign leader back off the edge from starting a new conflict or inflaming something? I'd love your take on that.
Well, I think, we've seen her roll out of her economic plan, which is much like what has happened in Venezuela and Cuba. So I'm very concerned about her economic plan because remember, to have a strong country, yes, you need a strong military, but you also need energy security and that leads to economic security. You need to have a strong economy and and energy security in order to project that power. And so she's anti-American energy. She is proposing to have price caps, which, like I just mentioned, led to, well, starvation in Venezuela and really the fall of the economy in Cuba when it was tried. Um, and then if she succeeds in the election, which I mean, and I don't speak for the either campaign, any campaign. I don't speak for AFPI. These are my personal political views. Um, I do believe that the United States will be in peril, just as it has been under Joe Biden. She has no foreign policy experience except for working, with Joe Biden, and that's been a disaster. I don't know how else you can state it. Everybody knows it's true. Um, so I'm very hopeful that she is not elected, but there are no guarantees. And if she is elected, we can see that she has promised to pressure Israel. She has shown to be very pro Hamas. She has, talked about decreasing police security in the city, saying that there's got to be other ways. We should decrease the funding and find other ways. She's opened the border, and even though she's the border czar, she hasn't protected the American citizens from the illegal immigrants that are entering, mostly military age men. It's very, very scary, the idea that someone with her far left Democrat beliefs, you know, not punishing for crimes, being soft on crime, opening border, not understanding about projection of power, being consumed by DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, even in our military, and being pro-transing children, which is, I mean, the world is rejecting that, and she and her allies in the Democrat Party are still very much behind that trend. She's talked about how young people probably are so worried about the climate they don't want to have children. So she's anti-human, opposed to having wonderful babies, because like Elon Musk has said, he's worried about a population collapse. If you look at the population growth of places like Japan, South Korea, but even the United States, we're actually not replacing our people as they pass away. We need more American babies so that
Mhm.
we don't need to have illegal immigration, and we can welcome legal immigrants that build up our economy and make America greater.
She's just rolled out this sort of economic policy plan that does include a $6,000 tax credit essentially for having a baby. Do you
Well,
believe that's going to happen? And how is that going to work? Is it the right kind of incentive?
well, Democrats love to spend the taxpayer money. There's no question. But what she did is she stole, just like she stole Donald Trump's idea. She stole JD Vance's idea. He said we want to do a $5,000 tax credit, and you saw the newscasters and the media that night and the next day talk about, oh, he's going to use all this money and give $5,000 for the child tax credit. And then she comes out with, no, we're going to do it 6,000 for every new baby. Oh, it's the best idea in the world. I mean, the media and the big technology companies, most of them, Facebook, Google, everything but Twitter, basically, is in the tank for the Democrats, and hardcore support, and even banning or hiding searches for President Trump, the Trump assassination attempt, all of these sort of attacks or negative is supported in the search engines and on the websites, and everything that supports the Republican platform or our candidates is hidden, suppressed, or made to look bad.
Do you think it's a bait and switch? She's just going to pluck everything good from the Trump
No,
campaign and
it's
offer it,
clear
and then once she gets in office, it's coming back.
Yes, she stole the idea of no tax on tips. President Trump talked about that for months. All of a sudden, it's her big idea, and they said negative things about him doing this. It's going to be devastating to the budget. Now she does it. Oh, it's the best thing in the world. No tax on tips. What a phenomenal idea, Kamala. It's unbelievable. And the media is not calling her out for her stealing of ideas. She has no original ideas, clearly. And, she got where she got without ever winning a national election. She's been selected twice now, once as the vice president when she was a failed presidential candidate. And then now they literally did a coup, pulled Joe Biden out, and you're out, you're done. And we're just going to switch to Kamala Harris in spite of the American people really rejecting her. And if they know about her platform, and this is why she doesn't do press, and there's not a big platform out on her website and things, is they reject. Like more than 90% of the Americans reject these ideas that are high taxes, government money, crowding out private money, and giving away the taxpayer dollars because we can't afford it. And that whether it's to other countries or it's $25,000 now she wants to give to new home buyers, well, that'll just make every house cost $25,000 more. And here we go with government money again, picking winners and losers. It's not for you and me. It is probably going to be targeting the recently arrived illegal immigrants, sadly.
Well, it's really shocking what's happening. And I think the most important and most beneficial thing that you have to offer the politically basic audience is helping them make those connections between the leadership options they have to consider voting for on November 5th and how it affects the United States as a sovereign nation with what used to be very strong military. I'd like your take on the strength of the U.S. military right now and our national security, with the border being in the state that it's in and the military being the state that it's in. But connecting those dots between the strength of our nation today, the decision between a Donald Trump and a Kamala Harris as commander-in-chief, which is such a critical position, just globally in terms of how we are respected and feared, and how that matters in keeping our nation safe and as really the protector of other allied nations around the world. How do you see the United States right now from just the last, let's say, 2 presidential election cycles even? 2016 was so unique on its own. 2020 was a roller coaster, so odd. And here we are in 2024, stranger than ever. But we cannot get so insulated and so laser focused on the drama of it, really, that we don't understand the importance of the ripple effect that it has on an international scale. I'd love your thoughts on that.
Oh my gosh, that's a big question, Kyle. First of all, as to our military, it is greatly weakened, and now all my opinions are my own, but the Heritage Foundation came out with an analysis of our military and how our military is doing like today, and it's basically most of the forces are not succeeding, and so that's the first sad note. And then secondly, we have a smaller navy now than the Chinese Communist Party's, People's Republic of China. And we're being threatened on every side. I would say our military equipment is not keeping up with the fast pace of innovation. We tend to have an older kind of ordering system and security process in place for the new innovative equipment. And we have the best military in the world, don't get me wrong, but we need to be more innovative and nimble and less top down. And the Pentagon is a huge bureaucracy, kind of built like 1950s style, if you get my drift. But looking at how does the world look at us, and how does this whole situation sort of play out? Kamala Harris, we know her because she's been the vice president for almost 4 years. We know her policies. She's to the left of Bernie Sanders. So if you like having rising prices, a lot of inflation, a hatred of reliable energy, which is in everything around in our homes, our makeup, our pharmaceuticals, and that's hydrocarbons or fossil fuels. We need cheap and abundant energy that's reliable. And that is the most reliable after nuclear, which is also very renewable and reliable and lasts a long time. And we need permitting reform to make it possible to build more nuclear plants, because it is green and lasts so long. But looking at the situation, I guess we have a choice of two paths. We know President Trump's economy because he puts every American first. He knows that the people that are least educated, that haven't had a fair shake, need a little help. And he gave them that help when he was president, and he wants to do it again. And for an example, President Trump, under his administration, minorities, whether it was Asian, Hispanic, Black, every minority actually had the biggest gains in the salary increases during his administration. Manufacturing jobs were coming back. Women did the best they've done in 50 years in the United States. We had like the best economic growth in the history of our country, with something that President Trump passed in 2017 called the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And it was like rocket fuel for our economy. He cares about the American people's security as well, and he purposed to improve our military and bring it up to date. So he did really big investments into our military. He knew that, for instance, the historically Black colleges had always kind of limped along looking for funding and begging the Congress or the president for a little money. He just made it possible that they would be funded and be able to educate the people that want to go to those schools. Those were amazing, but he did other things. He had the most secure southern border in my lifetime, and he passed something called the USMCA. It was a new trade deal with our great allies to the north and the south. And he did away with something called NAFTA, which when I was about my early 30s, when I read the NAFTA agreement, I thought, my gosh, this is such a bad trade agreement. This is such a bad deal. It hurts the American workers. But all the smart guys on TV were like, oh, this is so wonderful. It wasn't. President Trump really put the American people first. Now, when you look at the Kamala Harris and the administration over the past almost 4 years, you can see that they really are tone deaf to the American people. The American people are not to the far left. We're actually a center-right country. They are, I would say, out of step with the United States, with the people of our country. The average person was not bailing out Antifa rioters. They were not calling to defund the police. They were not looking to open our southern border and bring in illegals and then quickly make them citizens so that they could vote to keep them, the left, the Democrats, in power. All of these are really antithetical to American values. We are a country that still believes in God, that still largely goes to church. And that we understand that our founders had a great faith in God, and that's where our laws come from, literally from the Bible. That's not part of anything you'll hear at the DNC convention, or that will be in the Democrat platform. So I do believe that this is a fork in the road. This is about free speech. This is about prosperity and security for our country, or follow along in the left experiment of open borders, not projecting strength around the world, going along to get along instead, and not putting the American people and their interests first, whether it's in trade or housing our homeless veterans. Wherever you can look, there's a stark contrast between the Democrats, who are not the party of JFK anymore. They are leftists. And anyone that tells you that they're not attempting to implement a top-down Marxist type regime that's more like a fascistic regime in this country, if they tell you that's not true, they're lying to you. That is what they're doing. That is what Kamala Harris, her father was a Marxist professor. She is a Marxist descendant. We call them red diaper babies. And President Trump is an entrepreneur who understands how to get things done. He was very tough on the budget when I was an ambassador. He would ask us to cut our budget by 20% as an experiment every year, by 10%, and by 5%. We would have to go through that exercise. And he wanted us to reduce our spending by 20% every year, but the Congress would fund us and even plus it up. The Congress does not understand that money doesn't grow on trees. Actually, our kids are going to have to pay that money back one day.
Yeah. He was really a leader in not just shoring up the economy, but setting us on a good path for sustainability of a strong and growing economy. I want to go back to energy. I think that this is one of the most misunderstood concepts when people talk about energy independence. You mentioned nuclear. I think if you don't understand the world of energy, clean energy, how this works in our daily lives, how it bolsters our economic, independence and our freedoms, I'd love to hear you break down the concept and the issue of energy independence for our country.
Sure. So under President Trump, we were once again energy independent for the first time in 70 years. And now under Joe Biden, we're no longer energy independent. There is a push from the left. It's not just the American Democrats, it's global, the global left, to have the Green New Deal or net zero. And what it really is an anti-human agenda. They want us not to use fossil fuels, where about 85% of the energy in the United States that we consume come from fossil fuels or hydrocarbons. And we harvest the cleanest in the world here in the United States, and we transport it the most clean and green here in the United States than anywhere else in the world. But under President Biden, he's actually slowed the growth of our energy growth down. The fracking, Kamala Harris has openly said for a long time that she wants to ban fracking. So even if she pivots during this campaign, who people are is who they've been for a long time. People don't just turn over and become a new person in their late 50s. They do not do that. This is who she is. Look at her tapes over the years. And if we ban fracking in the United States, if we no longer have American hydrocarbons harvested and used, well, first of all, you won't have heat or air conditioning or lights in your home because there's not enough renewables to actually power the country. We get renewables power, depending on the state, up to 15% for most places. But it's also about 10 million good paying American jobs that are provided through the hydrocarbon and energy sector. And that's about $2 trillion every year to the American GDP, about 8% of our GDP. So for those reasons alone, we should all vote for President Donald Trump and continue the clean American hydrocarbon harvesting and not accept or embrace a net zero, anti-human, deindustrialization agenda. In the UK, which is a first world country, England, tens of thousands of people died last winter because they couldn't afford heat in their homes. That's the future that we're looking at. There's an agenda to only have people in the United States drive EVs. In fact, it's a goal in California to ban the sale of combustion engine or gas-powered cars by 2035, I think it is. And so they'll have to start transitioning now to achieve that. And the average person can't afford an electric vehicle. And so I think the deindustrialization goal is to push the average American working person into public transportation, onto bikes, and out of their free car. Because when you have a car and the government can't turn it off, you're a free citizen. Now, the Congress is trying to pass a law that the government can turn your car off. Can you imagine driving somewhere and you haven't said the right thing on social media, and so they kill your car? There's a kill switch. Well, that's what Congress right now is contemplating. So there's a lot we can do by calling our congressman and saying, please don't vote yes for that. That's a bad idea. But under the Harris administration, Kamala Harris was the tie-breaking vote for something called the so-called Inflation Reduction Act. It's actually an inflation-inducing act, which pushed out billions of dollars to leftist causes, even anti-Israel causes, through this Inflation Reduction Act. It also funded 87,000 new IRS agents, and they specifically went after tips. They were looking for all the tips, and they wanted to tax the tips. So she was the tie-breaking vote to tax your tips. And now she's saying, oh, we're not going to tax tips. Trust me when I say, I never saw a leftist Democrat that didn't want more taxes. So I assure you, she'll find a way to tax those tips.
Yeah, John Kerry used to be the flip-flopper. I think she has successfully taken the top spot. It's pretty remarkable. Do me a favor and explain in crayon, what's fracking?
Oh, fracking. Hydraulic fracturing is a revolutionary way to unlock hydrocarbons from rock. And they do it here in my home state of Pennsylvania. They do it in Texas. They do it up in the central north of our country, Oklahoma, North Dakota, Wyoming. There's many, many states that have energy that we're unlocking that was not available to us before this technology was invented. It's a miracle. The United States is the most innovative country in the world. And because of our innovation, we've been able to invent fracking. And I believe that every country that has energy should be able to use our clean technology and unlock that energy for their own security, especially our allies like the UK, which has banned fracking, or New York State, which has also banned fracking. In fact, before Russia invaded Ukraine just a few years ago, the New England states of the United States were powering and heating their homes with Russian gas because Pennsylvania isn't allowed to send a pipe up through New York State to get to New England to send our American homegrown clean gas. No, they were sending ships across the Atlantic from Russia to New England to power their homes and heat their homes. It's so perverse that certain states block American energy, which should be celebrated. But I think if we're successful and President Trump is elected this year, he will be able to unlock some of those blocks to American energy. So we once again regain energy independence. He's promised this in his campaign promises, but also achieve American energy dominance, which means we'll have enough energy to bring down the prices of everything here in the United States, not just at the pump, but price of food. The cost of everything goes up when energy is expensive, but also farmers. The fertilizer is a byproduct of hydrocarbons. And so that price will come down as well. So all sorts of good knock-on effects of having a pro-American energy president. So I'm really hopeful for that reason alone that President Trump is reelected.
Let me ask you quickly, what's the argument against it? What's the argument against energy independence, against fracking, against pipelines to transport our own energy sources? Why does the left not want it? Because it sounds great.
It sounds great to the average person and the expert. Here's the thing. There is this green agenda of net zero that President Biden, his advisors, the radical, I'll just call them the radical Democrats, are anti-American energy. So on day one of President Biden's term, he actually did an executive order and killed a pipeline called the Keystone XL pipeline. Now that was about 10,000 good paying jobs, and it was going to bring Canadian energy through the United States to be processed down in the Texas Panhandle and then sent out. And so it was a good profit center for the United States and a good partnership with Canada, who's an ally. But so they kill American energy projects. And then I will just also remind you that President Biden, along with Vice President Harris, said that even though they killed the Keystone XL pipeline, and now we have to import some foreign energy, which is always harvested dirtier than here in the United States, so not as environmentally friendly. They also, President Biden said, well, if there's a minor incursion into Ukraine, we won't do anything about it. Now, remember, Russia's a very big energy producer country. They also had the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. It was a project between Germany, really Europe, but Germany and Russia to bring Russian gas to Europe. And President Biden, along with Vice President Harris, said, oh, well, we're just not going to sanction that gas pipeline if they finish it. So there were many things that the Biden-Harris administration did that were anti-American energy, pro-foreign energy, and maybe gave enough permissions that Vladimir Putin thought, well, this seems like my opportunity. They're not going to do anything about it. If I go in a minor incursion, I get my Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline. And then I think when he saw the Afghanistan withdrawal, which Kamala Harris said she was the last person in the room when that decision to withdraw our troops from Afghanistan before we withdrew all of our diplomatic officers, or even our allies who had been working with us there for decades. Those were, those shows of weakness, I think, enabled Vladimir Putin to do what he did. So it's an example of the knock-on effect of being weak on energy and then weak as a leader.
Right. So if I'm going to say this back to you in my very basic understanding and language, we have thrown U.S. energy independence opportunities under the bus for, some would say, maybe the benefit of backdoor deals with foreign nations having to do with their energy. It's really not an America first set of decisions.
Yeah, Kyle, you're totally right. Not liking your own domestic energy, and then not leading with peace through strength does weaken our country, does cause, everybody that's filling their tank right now, they're paying right now 50% more than when President Trump left office. But there was a time when we were paying 100% more because the prices spiked so high. Because Kamala Harris and Joe Biden don't make good decisions. They're not keeping the interests of the American people at their core. Instead, they're attempting to implement a leftist agenda. And what does that mean? it's the net zero, it's, not allowing energy companies to do what they do best. It's killing things like the Keystone XL pipeline, which was a great project and is now dead forever. They told me they've dismantled the pieces and sold them off. That's how sad that is. So the investors lost, the employees lost, and America lost. I think that the stark choice that people have is, do you want to have a strong America where you can make a good living, not be taxed unfairly, and have common sense regulations so you can thrive, so you can start a business if you'd like to, so you can raise a family, afford to buy a house? Just as an example, under President Trump, most Americans could buy a house. They could afford to. Under President Biden, the average American can no longer buy a house. The cost is up so much more because of the inflation, which his big spending packages, like that IRA I mentioned to you, the $1.2 trillion package of spending, but there's been many trillions. Now, the sad thing is Kamala Harris has promised she wants to do that on steroids. She says, no, I'm going to do a $10 trillion climate package. So that will really be the Green New Deal on steroids, and you'll have more corruption, more illegitimate projects like Solyndra 2.0, projects that aren't legitimate businesses that couldn't make it without government money supporting them, much like a lot of the offshore wind projects, which just don't pencil out. They don't make sense, and that's why many of them are being canceled now.
I know I've only got you for a little bit longer, but I want to talk to you about the op-ed that you just wrote called "Here's What 4 Years of Kamala Harris Would Cost." Now, she's coming out and talking about all the ways that she is going to bring costs down for American families. She's talking about a price fixing plan, which many people understand to be just the regurgitation of a plan that's going to be an unmitigated disaster economically. In the end, it always is. She's talking about these tax credits, paying off student loans that the Supreme Court has continually blocked when Biden has tried it. She's sort of fanning out the dollar bills in front of voters. And a lot of people are accusing her of just straight up trying to pay for votes at this point. Now, we've already talked about how that goes on the back end of that. It's someone has to pay for it. And you just wrote a brilliant piece about just exactly how much this is going to cost us in the end. I'd love to hear from you on it.
Sure, Kyle. So as a matter of fact, under President Trump, people had more money in their pocket because of his policies and his slow spending. He really slowed the growth of spending. Now, under the Biden administration, so this is Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, the average American it's cost them about $11,400 every year to maintain their lifestyle. So whatever your lifestyle was up until January of 2021, it now costs almost $12,000 more a year just to maintain where you are, not to get ahead. And the reason I say not to get ahead is because American savings is down now below 4%. Historically, we've been almost 9%. So everybody has a little something put away for a rainy day. But that's not happening under the Biden administration because people feel so squeezed. They're putting things on credit cards. They're not putting away for the rainy day. It's below 4%. That's very concerning. If you look at other successful countries, people really do save for that rainy day because you never know what's around the corner. So I think that the signals of the anti-energy policy, anti-family policy, the fact that she's just come out with this proposal of the $6,000 tax credit for children. We need more American babies, so I support that. But she's just copying, like I said earlier, she's just copying J.D. Vance coming out about a week or two ago saying we should do a $5,000 child tax credit that was panned by the press. The press is like another arm of the Democrat Party at this point. We do not have a legitimate press in the United States anymore. When I grew up, we had a real press, and they would go after presidents no matter which side of the aisle, whether it was Jimmy Carter as a Democrat, where we had a similar bad economy, people couldn't afford houses. He did price controls on energy. And so we were sitting in lines, long lines to get gas. Every other day you could get gas. Those kind of price controls cause shortages. So I hope I answered your question, but in my op-ed, which ran in the Daily Caller, and I hope your viewers will take a look at it, I do talk about the cost of having a Kamala Harris presidency. And we're not even touching on her VP, who is a stolen valor vet, which is so shameful. But we're voting for Kamala Harris or not. And so she's the top of the ticket. And she has not earned her place. She doesn't know about foreign policy. She's economically illiterate because of what she's proposing to put price caps on things. That's like we talked about earlier, how Venezuela became such a poor economy and how the store shelves were empty because you can't put price caps. That's a top-down kind of Soviet Union type economy, and it never works.
What a time to be alive, considering potentially not being able to afford to be an American citizen. I mean, the choices are very, very stark there. And I so appreciate you breaking down the elements of that and helping my audience to see what we are potentially up against here. It is two very, very, very different sides of a coin that has implications internationally and here at home in a really powerful way. Now, I know your colleague, Linda McMahon, has just accepted the position of co-chairing Trump's transition team. That's a huge just coup for her and really, really amazing. Very happy to hear that. She's fantastic and wondering if Trump does become president again, if you might be open to some kind of position or ambassadorship in the future. What do you think?
Well, Kyle, first, Linda McMahon is a great patriot and completely qualified to do this job. So I'm thrilled that President Trump has chosen such an accomplished and capable woman who's been the CEO of WWE and led a big company with a worldwide footprint. But my political views and my opinions that I've expressed to you and your viewers are my own. I don't speak for President Trump or his campaign or AFPI. I'd be honored to serve President Trump. It was the best experience of my lifetime and the honor of my lifetime. He was a terrific boss, and he was so supportive of America First policies and of us always putting every American person first.
Well, we love to hear it, and we will look forward with anticipation to see what you continue to do. You've done so much for this country, and I know that you are only getting started. It's really remarkable. So I want to thank you so much for coming on the show with me today, Carla, and breaking all of this down. It's certainly a fascinating position that you've held. You've had tremendous just life and career experience so far. And it's been really incredible to hear from you. So thank you so much for joining me today on the show.
Thanks, Kyle. Great to be with you. Thanks a lot.
And thank you for joining us on this episode of Politically Basic, where we break down the basics of all political issues and let you decide. Be sure to follow us at politicallybasic.com and at Politically Basic on all socials so you don't miss a single episode. We'll see you next time.